Hi, Rebecca Zung here. And this is episode 4 in my series with Dr. Ramani on how to negotiate with a narcissist in divorce. And in this particular episode, we are focusing on how to deal with and co-parent with a narcissist in divorce. This is part 1 of a 2-part episode. So you're going to want to make sure that you subscribe and hit the little notification bell so that when I upload part 2, you will be notified right away. Dr. Ramani and I have come together so that we can offer you the psychological perspective from one of the top psychologists in the world on this area of narcissism, and my perspective as a top 1% divorce attorney, so that we bring you the legal and the psychological perspectives and bring you the best possible content that we can. So without further ado, let's dive into part 1. Hi, I'm Rebecca Zung, top 1% attorney and the author of the books Negotiate Like You Matter and Breaking Free, a Step-by-Step Divorce Guide. And I'm so excited to be here in this 4th installment of my series with Dr. Ramani, who is the formidable, the biggest proponent of narcissism and expert in the country. She is a psychologist, and she and I decided to get together and talk about law and psychology and how both approach narcissism and how they impact you. So stick around, and you will learn everything about co-parenting in this particular episode. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, now's the time. Hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification bell so that you can make sure to be notified every time I upload a new video. So today we are here talking about how to co-parent with a narcissist, which might sound like an oxymoron, because anything with a narcissist is kind of an oxymoron.
Well, I told people it's not co-parenting, it's single parenting with an elephant on your back. You know, it actually would be easier to be a full-on single parent than to co-parent with a narcissist. And I have to say, of all the areas, Rebecca, we're always generating content. We have a magnificent YouTube community, and they're always giving us new ideas for content. Co-parenting has got to be one of the top topics. But what I'm glad about, I was about to do it alone, but then you and I met. And then I thought, no, I want people to hear, because what they're getting frustrated with is the legal elements. I can walk them through the psychological thickets, but there are certain things legally that happen that incense them even more. And you might be able to shed some light on that.
So the first thing I want to say is co-parenting with a narcissist is something that you're dealing with when you're living in the same household, as you're breaking up, after you've broken up. I mean, so there's several different stages of it. And then the other thing is that it's actually slightly different, even though a lot of the same issues if you're dealing with somebody who you're just breaking up with. A lot of the millennials are not getting married anymore, and so there's not a divorce involved. And then there's also the divorce piece too. So there's kind of two separate ways that I look at it from the legal perspective, because one is a paternity action and one is a divorce action. And there's actually different ramifications for both when you're co-parenting. But in either one of the things that I tell people is to expect the narcissist to be a narcissist. So, there's not going to be any magic wand that anybody can wave that is going to turn this person into a person with a conscience, a person who has empathy, a person who cares about anybody but themselves. They'll say they care about their children. And that's one thing that you will hear all the forms of narcissists say. I love my children. My children are the most important to me. Because all narcissists know that that's what they're supposed to say. So you will hear them all say that. But when you're dealing with a real narcissist, it becomes pretty evident that that they're narcissists because they lack empathy and they really don't want what's best for the kids. They want what's best for them.
Well, one of the big challenges, and a question I get a lot, is why do narcissists even have children? You know, it really doesn't make sense. Children are incredibly inconvenient. They're demanding. They tend to suck all the oxygen out of the room. I know that's a very, sort of an unfair depiction. I say this as a mom, but it's hard. There's a lot of compromise involved in being a parent. Once again, one would say, why would a narcissist do this? And in a significant number of cases, narcissists become parents because they want the window dressing, the same way they might get a fancy car or wear a fancy outfit or go and take the right vacation. It's window dressing. So even after a relationship breaks up or a person gets a divorce, they want to maintain the facade. They want to maintain the window dressing. And in many cases, too, the dynamic is that the child is either a source of narcissistic supply for them or an extension of their identity. And so that idea of losing control over that, and that's a lot of why co-parenting is hard. Narcissists hate losing control. They like to be in control of everything. And as you've mentioned so many times, and I know very well from working on this clinically, they want to win. They want to win. And for them, the win is to show the world, look, I got my kids, I beat her or I beat him at this game, without really thinking through what it means to have these children 50% or even more of the time.
But they don't want to win because they think that it's best for the kids to have them 50% of the time. It has nothing to do with what's in the best interest of the child or children. It has to do with beating the other person or showing that they're the winner, or maybe it has to do with manipulating the other person, making the other person miserable, a way to gaslight them, a way to continue the campaign of control and the attempt of controlling the other person and their lives.
The hard part, though, and this is where I really look forward to your expertise, is the thing that messes up a lot of people. So I'll be working with a client. The person who is experiencing the narcissistic abuse has effectively been a sort of single parenting, constantly dealing with the shenanigans of the narcissistic parent. Now they're going through a curated court process, and these stupid terms like co-parenting come up. If anything, going through this process is the first time that they're actually having to interact with this person this much about these kids. Before, while they were still married, the narcissist was just sort of doing their own thing and showing up when they want. And so
I hear this
that's
all the
time.
time.
It's like this idea that now the court, you weren't co-parenting when you were married, for God's sake. And now you're ending this relationship.
They were off doing their own thing
exactly.
the whole time.
The relationship ends, and now there's this demand for something collaborative to happen where there's absolutely no template for this.
Well, and even beyond that, I mean, I agree with you. Now they have to actually collaborate and co-parent with each other and cooperate. But even more than that, now this other parent is demanding to have 50% of the time with the kids, and most of the non-narcissist parents will come to me and go, well, he or she never was there 50% of the time. They don't even know where the kid's school is. They don't know what their favorite food is. They don't know what they eat for lunch. They don't know who their teachers are. Well, here's the difficulty with that. That is that the judges don't care. The judge's position is they'll learn. They can learn. They can learn how to bathe the children. They'll figure it out. They didn't co-parent before because they didn't have to, because you were there. And so, and the climate in the courtrooms now is very much an assumption for 50-50.
I totally agree. Yes, absolutely.
It's really, in legal terms, we call it a presumption. And what that means is who has the burden of proof. So it used to be that the presumption was that a 50-50 custody plan was actually contrary to the best interests of the child. I could find you case after case after case that said that rotating custody, which is what a 50-50 plan was against the best interests of the child. Even before that, we had the tender years presumption, which presumed that if you had young children, they went to the mom. And dad's got, we got the term Disney dad. Dad's got every other weekend, dinner on Tuesday night, and that was it. I mean, that's how it went. And for years, even when I started practicing, we just stapled that parenting plan to the back of the marital settlement agreement, and that was that. There really wasn't a whole lot of fight about it.
That's interesting.
So what's happened is, a lot of the states have removed language from the statutes that made one parent seem more important than the other. So this happened 10, 12 years ago across the country, where they removed language like primary residential parent, or custody. You know, even the word custody has oftentimes been removed, or visitation. You know, who is visiting their kid, right? Or their kid is visiting them, or whatever. I mean, so when they removed that language from the statutes, it inadvertently created this shift that now both parents are equal.
Sure.
But that's where we stand now.
Yes.
And
yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, like it or not, and I actually have a case going right now, as we speak, where the husband is a flaming narcissist, and he filed for divorce when my client was 8 months pregnant, a month before she was getting ready to deliver. The child is now 6-8 months old, and he is demanding 50% custody. 6-month-old child. She's still breastfeeding. And guess what? We were in court a couple of weeks ago on a different matter in the case, and the judge, who's a white male, said, don't come back here to trial unless you're planning on getting 50-50, because that's what I'm going to be ordering. He hadn't even heard the facts of the case. He didn't know what's in the best interests of the child yet. Had no idea. But so that's what we call a presumption, because he's presuming that the best interest is 50-50, which means she's now going to have the burden of proving why 50-50 is no longer shouldn't be.
Which gets so to take it back to what we're talking about, which is, you know, we could talk all day, all night about the fact that the way family court is being run now, because I think that what I see and the agony that I see my clients who are experiencing narcissistic abuse and are going through divorce procedures are experiencing is that it's the inability of the court to make any kind of a qualitative judgment, that, you know, not that they're necessarily saying one parent is better than the other or not, but rather that it's like you said, these things like rotating schedules may not be indicated for, especially when one parent moves an hour away, and so what are you going to do in the morning? This poor kid's going to have to wake up hours
or has a crazy
earlier,
work schedule,
or it's a crazy work schedule,
or maybe
or
they
travels
travel
a lot. So all of that, but this is not what we're talking. We're not talking about those practical things. What we're talking about is something that isn't as black and white as traveling and moving and all of that. It's about this thing that the court either won't or can't recognize, which is these toxic personality patterns. And we've talked about this. We talked about this on an earlier episode in this series, which is you cannot use the word narcissist in the courtroom. You cannot. I've seen it blow up. You can't use the word gaslighting in a courtroom.
No, because
None
they just
of this
assume that you're an
terminology.
alienator.
Exactly.
Which we're going to be talking about in another episode.
Or that you're the difficult parent.
Correct.
So all of that we've talked about strategically. But now I know what at least the people have been saying in my YouTube community is, will you please tell us then how to do this? I mean, so I know from my side as a psychologist, when I'm walking people through co-parenting with a narcissist, it's things like, you know, you have Family Wizard, use Family Wizard, and never gravitate off of Family Wizard. You use it
or another
religiously, whatever app it is. Family Wizard is the one that's come up the most in the cases I've worked on. But whatever app that has been agreed upon, whether it's through mediation or in court, whatever, you use that. And even when, because what happens is the narcissist loves breaking rules and violating boundaries, but when all of it goes through that one space, then in some ways you're just sort of slapping their hand. But above all else, I say documentation, realistic expectations. Those are the two places we start from.
Okay, so you've hit on two of the ones that I was actually going to mention. So when I tell people about communication with a co-parent, I say pick one medium, just one. Have everything funnel through one.
Right, which could be one of these apps.
The app is the ideal thing. You can't necessarily get them always to agree to it. It brings me to another thing, is every single agreement has to be turned into a court order, because even if you just sign the agreement, if it's not a court order, then you have no teeth. You have no way of going back and getting them to adhere to it. So, but definitely using an app. getting them to agree to that early on. Most states require some sort of mediation or some sort of dispute resolution early on in the case to figure out a temporary parenting plan, even if you haven't gotten to the final destination yet. So when you go to that conference, that settlement conference on the temporary parenting plan, that needs to be one of the first things that you want. You want to have a mode of communication that is controlled. And everything goes through that. And they will fight it. They will resist it.
Oh, heck yeah.
They will say, oh, it's too hard to use. Oh, we're just standing here talking. Why can't we have a conversation like two normal people? They're going to do whatever they can. But here's the thing. So I have a case right now. It just happened a couple of weeks ago where my clients are supposed to use an app. Okay. So he comes to pick up the child and, takes the child for his parenting time. Next thing you know, she gets a thing through the app. Thanks for confirming, just confirming the conversation we just had, in which you agreed to allow me to have the child next Saturday during your parenting time. That conversation never happened. Didn't happen. But now he's trying to make her look bad by saying, that she's going back on her word or whatever.
I see this all the time. And so it's that combination, though, and the reason they psychologically don't like having that one consistent mode of communication is that narcissists thrive on triangulation. The creation of chaos by bringing all these other people in and twisting truths, and then that also builds upon gaslighting. So then you can say things like, I never said that, that never happened, all of that. So those themes play out. So one of the questions that will often come up, because at the end of the day, the head of steam we're heading towards is that this is not good for children. This is not good for the children, because that tends to get lost in the conversation is, well, there's people feeding them and, housing them and all of that. But this kind of tension, even if the parents aren't fighting in front of them, is really overwhelming for a child. A question I get, and I'm so looking forward to asking you this because I don't know it, I never completely know the answer. People are going through a divorce.
Hopefully I do.
Girl, if you don't, we're in trouble. So people are going through a divorce, and it's very, very clear that the child is going to need therapy. How does it work in divorce? Because one of the things that I see the struggle is that in many cases, in most cases, they need to get the agreement of the other parent, because you need both parties consenting to health care. And the other parent is resisting getting psychological services for that child. Can you shed some light on that? They're going to.
Definitely
Absolutely.
Going to.
So could you shed some light on that?
They want to shut down any areas where they're not going to have control.
As well as other eyes on that child, because the child having a chance to talk and really saying, this is tense, or my dad this, or, in other words, what narcissists hate are the seers of truth. So they don't like people who have their number. They don't like people who they know can see through them. They don't like people they can't charm. And they don't like people who are acting in these third-party objective capacities, like a good therapist who can't be swayed. They will try to win over that child's therapist.
If they end up in therapy, then they're going to definitely be in that therapist's face.
Let's go backwards for a minute. So you have a parent, the non-narcissistic parent is really worried about their child's mental health. They're like, and I'm going to tell them when I'm in session with the non-narcissistic parent, you really need to consider therapy for this child. Your child is struggling. Now they're having difficulty getting the other parent to consent. I'm working one case like this right now where you're talking severe mental illness in the child. And what's happening is that ultimately the parent is relenting, but even then is choosing substandard services. But let's go even more basic, that the narcissistic parent isn't agreeing to getting therapy for the child. What do they do?
Okay, so there's two avenues. Okay, so first of all, let me just remind everybody out there that nobody has any power over another person other than the judge. No one. Not the lawyers. There's no, divorce fairies that magically appear that make people behave, So when you have a conversation about how is he or she getting away with this, well, they just do unless you get the judge involved or unless they break the law and you call the police or something like that. That's different. But so when you're dealing with narcissists and you want your child to have therapy, the two ways that you can do that are, number one, file a motion that says, motion to order therapist for child. I've filed many of them. There are a few states, Florida being one of them, actually, that have recently amended their statute with regard to therapy for the child. And now you only need one parent's consent, which is very helpful. Very helpful.
Okay, so let me ask you another question, because
I have a second avenue.
Okay, so I have so many questions even based on that. I'm already thinking like all of my clients.
Remember.
Hold it. Got it.
The second way is to ask the court to order a custody evaluation.
Okay.
And a lot of times, actually, it's crazy, but the narcissist wants the custody evaluation because they think that you're going to be the one that's going to end up looking terrible. They think that they're going to charm this custody evaluator.
But it happens more than you think.
Right.
A lot of the custody evaluators don't understand narcissism. So they actually are charmed.
True. Well, it's definitely true. But if that happens, you can always get a second opinion and you can get somebody to critique that evaluation and all of that. So that's another whole layer. But a lot of times what people will ask me is, can we order a psych eval of the other parent? And I always say it's almost impossible because it has to be at issue in some way. But if you put it at issue in terms of the context of what's in the best interest of the child, then that is a backdoor way to get a psych eval done of the parent. So when you ask for a custody evaluation, you have to make sure that what you're asking for includes full psych evals of
the parent.
The parents.
Okay.
Both parents.
So I'm going to go back then to this question. So now you're saying that the only way you really can do this, like you said, the judge is really the only one who has this final say. If one parent is stonewalling,
unless there's a statute that says you only need one.
Okay, let's say you do only need one. All right. Now, how much weigh-in does the narcissistic parent who may be fighting therapy have on who you choose for therapy?
Well, if you only need one parent,
then that person can make the selection of who the therapist is.
That's it.
Okay.
And you just take them on your parenting time.
If you're not in a state that's had that modification, though, you still have to go, and it has to be done through court.
You have to jam everything through court when you're dealing with a narcissist, pretty much.
So,
unless you have enough leverage.
Sure.
I mean, and that's another whole conversation.
Right.
But if you can, basically you have to think about the narcissist as like this wild animal. And the only way that you're going to control a wild animal's behavior is to put them in a cage of some sort and surround them in some way, right? But they're never going to stop being wild.
But they're predictably wild.
Yes,
and like
totally.
a wild animal seems unpredictable.
100%.
A narcissist is more predictable than you or I, because
100%.
they're always acting in accordance with their core insecurities and all of that. So now, because the therapy question's a big one, because I have to say, anytime I work with people who are in a very difficult co-parenting situation, to me, stop number one is to make sure that your child has a safe place to talk, because what they're not often going to do, and probably shouldn't do, is come to the one parent and speak poorly of the other. They're already rattled enough, and you don't want them to do that.
Right.
A therapy could be a safer space for that to happen.
100%.
So that's one, but that's a big question that comes up a lot. So timing then. Okay, so I've got my client in the office, they're telling me what's going on. I'm like, your child needs to be in therapy. You're saying they need to go back to court. I know you may not be able to give a hard and fast answer to this. Realistically, what are the time frames we're talking about?
Well, and you know what, actually, let me just add a third way that you can get therapy for a child, and that is if you can get the other parent to agree to it. And then you render it into an agreement and put it into a court order. I mean, which, by the way, they sometimes do agree to.
They do sometimes.
So if you're in a dispute resolution conference, whatever it's called in your state, mediation, settlement conference, whatever, when you're talking about getting your app, and you're also talking about a temporary parenting plan, which I want to talk about, parenting plans.
Yeah.
You will also want to ask about, therapy at that time. And here's the thing about narcissists is they don't want to look bad in front of lawyers, mediators, and judges. They want to appear like they're the good ones. And so when you put them in a mediation situation, and a lot of times people go, oh, he'll never agree, she'll never agree, no way, no way, no way. And that you get them in that setting, and suddenly they do. Now you have to make sure you have a really strong mediator, a good mediator who's, you know, well versed in narcissism and that sort of thing. But they might agree to it. And the thing about narcissists is, as soon as the ink is not even dry, they're changing their mind.
Sure. Yeah.
But once it's signed, you get that thing to the court, you get it turned into a court order, and it's done. And now, if they don't want to do it anymore, they have to go file a motion to try to set that order aside or get it modified in some way, and it's a big pain in the neck for them to do.